All right, so you know how much we all like, better conversations.
Yeah.
And we're going deep today into the art and science of conversation, kind of pushing what we know a little bit further.
Absolutely.
You want to be that person that can like connect with anybody, right?
Right.
And chat about anything and make it feel engaging.
Yeah.
So get ready, because this is going to transform the way you approach like every interaction.
Well, it is fascinating to me that it's so much more than just words.
Oh, yeah, this source like dives right into that. It says, the foundation of any great conversation isn't about being like witty or charming.
Right.
It's about active listening,
Mm.
but not the surface level.
No, it's about really absorbing what the other person is saying and thinking about it this way, like when someone makes you feel heard, truly heard, it builds a connection on a whole other level. And that's when trust forms. And that's when you can get to those deeper, more fulfilling conversations.
So how do we move beyond just pretending to listen?
Yeah.
The source had this one tip that really stuck with me. Put the phone away.
Yeah.
Seriously, are you really listening if you're scrolling through Instagram?
It's about being present. And that's something we can all work on, nodding along, making eye contact, using phrases like, tell me more. These aren't just tricks. They're signals that show the other person, hey, I'm here with you in this moment.
Now, here's where it gets really cool. You know how sometimes a conversation feels forced?
Mm-hmm.
The source talks about this idea of genuine curiosity as being the fuel for any great conversation.
It makes sense, right? If you're actually interested in what the other person has to say, the conversation will flow naturally.
Yeah.
Think about it. Would you rather answer the question, do you like your job? Or what's the most interesting project you're working on right now?
Wow, okay, that second question is way better.
Right.
It invites the person to share something they're excited about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a small shift, but it encourages people to open up and share more than just surface-level information.
All right, this next one is something you can use right away.
Okay.
The source called it the FORD technique.
Okay.
Have you heard of this?
I am familiar with the concept.
It's brilliant.
It's a fantastic tool to have in your arsenal.
It stands for Family, Occupation, Recreation, and Dreams.
Yeah.
The source suggests using these 4 areas as springboards for finding common ground. You meet someone new, and instead of awkward silence, you have these prompts to spark a real connection.
It's not about turning the conversation into an interrogation, of course.
Right.
It's about using those categories to uncover shared interests and passions.
And it can go so much deeper than small talk.
Absolutely.
Imagine you're talking to someone about their occupation. It could lead to a fascinating conversation about their career aspirations, their challenges, their proudest moments.
It's about digging beneath the surface and uncovering those hidden gems that make each person unique.
All right, let's talk about empathy.
Okay.
The source dives into this idea that it's more than just saying, I understand.
Right. Empathy is about truly connecting with the other person's emotional state. It's about recognizing and validating their feelings, even if you don't necessarily agree with their perspective.
So it's not about trying to fix their problems or offer solutions.
Not always. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply acknowledge the other person's feelings. Saying something like, that sounds really frustrating, or I can see why you're upset, can go a long way in building rapport.
I get it. It's about creating that safe space where the other person feels heard and understood. It's about showing them that you're on their side, even if you don't see eye to eye on everything.
Precisely. And that's a foundation for any meaningful connection.
Now let's get real for a second.
Yeah.
We've all encountered those people who dominate conversations, right?
Oh, yeah.
What are we supposed to do when we're stuck with a conversation hog?
It's a common dilemma, and the source provides some surprisingly effective strategies. They recommend focusing on subtle but effective ways to regain control of the conversation.
Like, I need all the tips I can get for this one.
Well, for starters, instead of trying to interrupt directly, which can come across as rude, try gently interjecting during a natural pause.
Okay, that makes sense. But what if they just keep going? Like they don't even breathe?
Right.
The source mentions something about nonverbal cues. What do they mean by that?
It can be subtle things like leaning back slightly or breaking eye contact momentarily. These can signal that you'd like a chance to speak.
So it's about finding that balance between being assertive and being polite, right?
Exactly. You're not trying to shut the person down, just gently guide the conversation back to a more balanced place.
All right, what about those moments when a conversation hits a wall? You know, the dreaded awkward silence.
The source actually suggests reframing our view of silence. It doesn't have to be awkward. Sometimes a pause allows for reflection, giving both people a moment to process what's been said.
That's an interesting way to look at it. But what if it's clear the other person is uncomfortable with the silence?
Then it's a chance to put those active listening skills into practice. Reflect on what's been discussed and ask a thoughtful follow-up question.
The source had some really cool ideas for keeping conversations engaging. Like, have you ever noticed how a well-placed story can completely change the energy of a conversation?
Storytelling is a powerful tool. It allows us to connect on a deeper level, sharing experiences and emotions that resonate with the other person.
But it's not about hijacking the conversation with your own epic tales, right?
No, it's about finding those moments where a short, relevant anecdote can make a point more relatable and memorable. Think of it like adding seasoning to a dish. You don't want to overwhelm the flavor, just enhance it.
Okay, so I've always wondered about this. How much does humor play a role in a good conversation?
Humor is definitely a key ingredient. It can help break the ice, diffuse tension, and create a more relaxed atmosphere. It shows you don't take yourself too seriously.
But isn't there a risk of using humor inappropriately? Like, what's funny to one person might be offensive to another?
That's why it's important to be mindful of your audience and the context. What might be hilarious among close friends could be completely out of place in a professional setting. The source really stresses this point, actually.
Makes sense. So no offensive jokes, no making fun of people, and definitely no inappropriate humor at work. Got it.
Right. Humor is about creating connection, not division.
Okay, so what about those times when you're in a group conversation and you want to keep things flowing smoothly? I sometimes struggle with transitioning between topics. It can feel so abrupt, you know.
Smooth transitions are an art form. The source offers a few techniques for bridging the gap between topics without it feeling forced.
Lay it on me. I need all the help I can get.
Well, using phrases like "speaking of" or "that reminds me of" can create a natural segue from one topic to another.
Ooh, I like that. It feels so much more elegant than just blurting out a random thought.
Exactly. It shows you're listening and that you're thoughtfully connecting the different threads of the conversation.
There's this one technique I've heard of called yes and. Have you ever used that? I think it came from the improv world.
It's a fantastic technique, and it's not just for improv. It's about building on the other person's ideas instead of shutting them down.
So instead of saying yes but, you say yes and.
Exactly. It shows you're listening, that you value their contribution, and that you're open to exploring their idea further.
Okay, I can see how that would create a more positive and collaborative dynamic in a conversation.
And it can lead to some really creative and unexpected outcomes.
All right, what about visual aids? I'm not sure how that fits into everyday conversations.
Visual aids aren't always necessary, of course, but there are times when they can really enhance a conversation.
Like if you're describing a trip you took and you show a photo on your phone.
Exactly. Or if you're explaining a complex concept and a simple diagram could help clarify things.
The key is to make sure the visual aid is relevant and enhances the conversation, not distract from it.
You got it.
So much of this is about recognizing those subtle cues and nuances in a conversation, isn't it? Like the source mentioned this thing called conversational threads. What are those?
It's about recognizing recurring themes or topics that come up throughout the conversation. Instead of ignoring them, acknowledge those threads and weave them together.
It's like finding those hidden connections that create a sense of continuity and make the conversation feel more cohesive.
And sometimes those recurring themes can point to something really important that needs further exploration. It's like they're hinting at something deeper that needs to be uncovered.
All right, now we need to address the elephant in the room, social anxiety. I know so many people struggle with this, and even the thought of starting a conversation can feel terrifying.
You're absolutely right. Social anxiety is incredibly common, and the source offers some practical tips for managing those feelings of nervousness and self-doubt.
What are some things people can do to start feeling more comfortable in social situations?
Preparation is key. Think of some conversation starters ahead of time so you're not caught off guard. And remember, starting small can make a big difference. Practice with people you feel comfortable with, like friends or family.
What about those moments when you freeze up, your mind goes blank and you can think of anything to say? Any tips for that? Oh, man, those moments can be so frustrating. I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
What does the source say about handling those mental blocks?
Well, they suggest, focusing on being present in the moment. Instead of getting caught up in those anxious thoughts, try to tune in to what the other person is saying. Really listen.
Okay, so instead of worrying about what I'm going to say next, I should just focus on what's happening right now.
Exactly. And remember to be kind to yourself. Everyone has moments where they feel tongue-tied. It's not a reflection of your worth or your ability to connect with others.
All right, let's talk about those quieter folks we sometimes encounter. The ones who might be shy or just prefer to listen more than they speak. How do we approach those conversations without making them feel pressured?
Well, it's all about creating a safe and comfortable space for them to open up at their own pace. Start by asking open-ended questions that don't require a lot of effort to answer. Things like, what are you most passionate about? Or, what's something that made you smile today?
Those are great.
Yeah.
And I imagine it helps to be patient and avoid interrupting or rushing them, right?
Absolutely. And remember, silence isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it just means the other person is processing their thoughts or gathering the courage to speak up.
So how do we handle those conversations that take an unexpected turn? When things get a little heated or maybe even controversial.
It's about navigating those conversations with grace and respect, even when you strongly disagree. The source emphasizes the importance of active listening, even in challenging situations.
I think it's so easy to get defensive or feel like we need to prove our point. But that can really shut down the conversation, can't it?
It definitely can. Remember, the goal isn't to win an argument. It's about understanding the other person's perspective and finding common ground, even amidst disagreements.
And if things start to get too heated?
Sometimes the best approach is to gracefully disengage. You can say something like, I appreciate your perspective, but I think we need to agree to disagree on this one.
Okay, so we've talked about conversation hogs, shy folks, and even those times when things get a little controversial. But what about dealing with criticism? Those moments when someone gives us feedback that we might not want to hear?
Oh, yeah. The source suggests viewing those moments as opportunities for growth. Instead of getting defensive, try to listen objectively and see if there's any validity to what they're saying.
I think that's so hard to do in the moment, though. It's natural to want to protect ourselves, right?
It is, but remember, feedback, even when it's difficult to hear, can help us become better communicators.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I've gained so many valuable insights. What are some key takeaways that you think will make the biggest difference for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is that becoming a skilled conversationalist isn't about mastering a set of tricks or techniques. It's about approaching every interaction with genuine curiosity, empathy, and the desire to truly connect.
And remembering that it's a journey, right?
Yeah.
We're all constantly learning and growing as communicators.
Absolutely. And the more we practice these skills, the more natural and effortless they will become.
So as you go out into the world and engage in those conversations, remember what resonated with you today. What will you try out in your next interaction? How will you approach those tricky conversations with more confidence and grace?
And perhaps the most important question of all, how can we all become better listeners in a world that's constantly vying for our attention?
That's something to ponder, isn't it?
It definitely is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the art of conversation. Until next time, happy conversing.